May, thank you so much for coming up to Byron Bay from Melbourne to come to see us. So we've been having regular catch-ups every couple of weeks, and I thought it was about time that we actually recorded it and got this on camera. So I would love you to share who you are and what your mission is.
Well, I'll start with my mission, which is ruthlessly simple, and that is to align capital of all forms with human values. I got to that through a pretty tortuous path through medicine, a degree in innovation, a master's of public health, working on boards, working with professional football team, working with returned veterans, working as a career medical officer for the Defence Force. So my exposure to the human condition has been quite wide and varied, and I've also had the chance to work with investors on both sides of deals, vetting and looking at how we can improve startups. But I guess where I've come to is this feeling that where we're placing our efforts, whether that's attention or money or time, is not necessarily aligned with helping humans thrive. And so that is how I've kind of arrived at that mission.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So a couple of weeks ago, I did an interview with Ronan Heine around the masculinity crisis. My question was there a masculinity crisis?
Yeah.
And kind of, I feel like this conversation has been a building on top of that concept and exploring that topic. It's definitely had me wanting to go deeper and explore some quite confronting information. You shared with me an article that you wrote called A Love Letter to Good Men.
Yeah.
And I found it quite confronting, but I thought it was important to explore it. So can you share some of the key concepts for that article, and let's dig into that.
Well, I was asked to write this article in the wake of the Bondi massacres, which I'm sure many people will remember. And if you're listening from abroad, you can just Google Bondi massacres and find out about this horrible event that happened in Sydney. This comes off the back of, I think, an ongoing and a rolling conversation that goes in and out of the media about men's violence and the crisis in masculinity that you referred to. And the article actually wasn't published. The news cycle moved on, and this article, which was contributed to by many, kind of has been on the shelf. Still, within it is an attempt to explore the question of why are we at this point? What is it that's happened in men's childhoods, their upbringing, the parenting they've experienced, but also more broadly, culture and the zeitgeist and the pressures on men to perhaps perform in certain ways that don't serve their relationships and their own well-being. And so that's essentially how it unfolds, and it's a bit of a invitation to men, and I think most men are good men, they want to be good men, and it invites them to perhaps dig in and join a conversation about how we can realign things.
Some of the facts you share in that article, though, are confronting. Could you maybe give some of the top line facts and figures that you explored in it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to quantify things, and I want to caveat that by saying I think quantification is part of any story, and it's also not the whole story. And so I think often people will be defensive about these facts, but I think there's some things I do want to share about men in the personal and the professional realm as we're able to capture them, and also acknowledge that men also have their lived experience. So this is not attempting to gaslight anyone, but 20 years ago when I was on the board of Vic Health, it was uncovered that intimate partner violence, so generally male perpetrated violence, was the leading cause of death and disability for women, and 20 years on that is largely unchanged, which is horrifying. The Australian Institute of Health and Wellbeing also recognise men's violence is a problem for men. Most violence men experience is by other men. We look at suicide, men, the leading cause of death for them up until about the age of 40 is suicide. Some stats peg it at 4 times more likely for men to die by suicide than women. I know in Australia that this is something that we're aware about, but it doesn't seem to be a statistic we're able to shift. Beyond deaths of despair, there are lives of despair. Men are 3 times more likely to be addicted. 12 times more likely to be incarcerated in the US. The Australian data I've been able to find is men are 92% of inmates. This blew my mind because at the same time, we know when it comes to things like sexual assault, more than 98% of men who perpetrate sexual assault never face any legal consequence. So when you go, well, 92% of inmates are male, but 98% of men who engage in those kind of crimes are not even in the system. You look at the professional realm and the stats are similarly stark, and I know I'm rabbiting on, but 20% of CEOs are women and 33% of board directors are male. But when you get up to the gourmet end of things and we look at the ASX, between the ASX 200 and 300, there's 90 and 95% of those seats are taken up by men. At one point, there were more male CEOs of ASX-listed companies named Andrew than there were females total. We look at access to capital. Women found around 20% of companies. They only have access to 0.9% of the capital pool in Australia. And the stats in the US are not, dazzlingly different, and they're going backwards. And I guess most alarmingly at the intersection of the personal and the professional is this iconic 2023 study by Zhang and Bruning. Women who earn more than men, so you go, well, women maybe should try harder. 33% of women who earn more than men are 33% more likely to experience violence from their male partner and 20% more likely to experience emotional abuse. So I hope that sets the scene. I think we have a problem.
I think we have a problem. And the all-confronting statistics, I think the last one hit me as hard as any of them. Just this idea, I have two daughters, and the thought of them going through their education, striving to kind of move, have an impact, create financial freedom and an independence for themselves, and just being aware of a fact that says by them creating financial freedom for themselves, they're 33% more likely to suffer violence against them from a partner. That for me is absolutely horrifying. So what is from your perspective, trying to understand the root cause of these problems from your professional and your kind of lived experience, where do we start here? Where do you start digging into where the root of these issues were, if we want to get to a place where we want to move to a better future? Where do we start?
I want to start by acknowledging the pain and the hurt women have experienced, because I have picked glass out of a woman's head who's had, a vase smashed onto it. I have cared for women who have been beaten unconscious and left on the floor and then returned to their husbands. I have been subpoenaed to court, and not for a second do I want to make excuses for this violent behaviour. What I want to say is I think that this violent behaviour, or the lashing out that you're talking about, is not well behaviour. It's not adaptive. It's not helpful. And underneath it all, my view, and this is not an excuse, is that it's hurt. Men are suffering because I don't think a healthy, balanced man deals with threat in 2025 in these ways, not least of which the consequences. Mm-hmm. And so I think the question you're asking is, how do we help men, support men, empower men to experience vulnerability, might be the thought, or process their emotions in ways that are more functional to human connection.
Yeah. And to continue to frame this conversation, if those statistics aren't confronting enough, thinking about this epoch that we're moving into, this change period that we're moving into, the artificial intelligence, the potential impact on jobs, the potential to remove purpose and meaning from big swathes of men and females' lives. But if we're looking at the perpetrators of violence, we do know that in society where men have a lack of purpose, lack of direction, bad behaviors can start to happen. And so this is the framing that I've been thinking about this conversation. Like, we need to dig into what is creating these issues now, because we might be just about to go through a period where we sprinkle gas on the issue.
I agree, and I guess that speaks to why I'm here and have come up, because there's a big part of me that, say, 20 years ago, when I was exposed to this, thought someone's going to take care of this. This is going to get better. Efforts are being made. Governments have poured billions into it. However, we do not seem to be better off. And I agree, this conversation is critically important for everyone who is listening and every circle beyond that. So
who needs to listen to this? Because there's obviously people already listening to this, but who do you think is going to need to listen to this conversation? If people were sharing this conversation with someone, who needs to be across this? Who should be the one person they should stop right now and share this information with, this conversation with?
I'm going to say everyday blokes. Andrew, Daz, Jeremy, Dad, my brother, everyday blokes. I hope that the blokes in my world, in my realm, who are actually doing their best are listening in, because I think we are all responsible, and I think anyone with any capacity, even if it's an extra 15 minutes a week, is who we want to speak to. There are obviously people that are doing a huge amount of work, but I think what we need is, 26 million Australians doing just one little bit more than 100 blokes doing it perfectly.
Yeah, because I'll be honest, I read your article and I was overwhelmed. Like, in reading, I was overwhelmed by the data, the suffering in that. It's very vivid. It's hard to not feel, and it's hard to not feel, wow, this feels so big.
Yeah.
I guess I then put my founder mindset hat on. I was like, okay, what is the next step? Like, what is the actions? Where can we actually start here? And I'd like to get to that. I think I'd like to have some sort of, next step solutions, actions that people can be taking after listening to this conversation. I think before we get to that, I'm going through this process of trying to educate myself on this problem. It was only like a couple of weeks ago when, I've seen multiple suicides around me. It seems to be, every couple of months, like you'll see a male suicide. And so I was approaching it from that angle, and I was like, okay, I need to have balance in this conversation. Who do I know that can give me balance this conversation? May will give me balance this conversation. And so that's what I want to be educated. Like, I want to be educated through this process. Like, how can I evolve? How can I get better as a parent, as a man, as a brother, So yeah, this is my goal, I think, in this conversation.
That feels like a lot of pressure. And I'll say, I think I'm not sure that I have the answers. I certainly have a lot of questions like you. And in thinking about this topic, the AI era we're moving into, and the social events, the suicidality, which I know has touched both our lives, I go back to different anecdotes that have come my way. And I am also asking, what is women's role in this, without invalidating the lived experience, which I know has been incredibly difficult for many women. How do we need to move, and how do we not simply react but respond? I'll give you a vignette of something that came to me. So there are a number of amazing men's groups in Melbourne, and I'm sure around Australia, the Man Cave, Tomorrow Man, and then on the Mornington Peninsula, one called Yeah Man. And Ben, who I spoke to in preparation for this podcast, shared this with me. There was recently a viral meme about, men saying, I just want my wife to stay at home and be relaxed. And rightly, there was a bit of outrage in regards to what was seen as regressive ideas around what men and women should be to each other. And a lot of famous, very well followed female influencers were out there going, this is oppressive, this is pathetic, and, you know, having stimulating and kind of putting out rage bait. And I get it, like a lot of women feel that way too. Ben actually said to me, he reached out to a number of these influencers and said, hey, we're doing this amazing work on the Bondi Junction. We have a night called In Her Shoes where blokes come in and actually just listen. They listen to what it's like to be a woman in 2025 and take it in. Would you promote it? Would you be part of it? He said not one of these influencers actually picked up that invitation. And it's in that moment that I guess I felt, right, we really both need to be part of this solution. This can't just be men come back when you fixed it, because we're linked. We need each other. And this is an us problem. Whilst there is clearly power imbalances here, women have a part to play in making it safe for men to change.
Yeah. So is there any common themes, are there any common like links when men play out and act in violence? Are there any common themes that you're seeing around that man before that this behavior plays out? Like, is it linked to, for example, is there an economic thing? Is it people? Is it men who have less disposable income the more? Or like, does that play a factor in it at all? Is there any economic element to this?
Well, last time I checked, and again, I would invite anyone listening in who wants to fact check this, to kind of rebut. I understand intimate partner violence to affect people at every economic scale. Mm-hmm. This is not, a working class problem. It's not a problem of the elite. Mm-hmm. And within the intimate partner violence, there's obviously not simply physical violence. There's emotional abuse, there's financial abuse, coercive control, which sort of intersects with all of these different ways of looking at unhealthy dynamics. A question I have asked, and I know I'm kind of skating around your question to me, is what is happening for a male before he explodes and unloads and, does damage? And it's a question I asked when I was back at university doing a master's in public health. And what I found is that there's very, very little research about intimate partner violence from the male perspective. And of the little research that exists, it's clear that men are not necessarily in touch with their emotional terrain. They might be feeling needled, they might be feeling provoked, set upon, attacked. None of this is excuse for physical violence, but that goes on and on below the water level. And I guess the laws of physics say there has to be some kind of a symmetry. There's an exchange. And so when men finally take action, whatever that action looks like, that's what hits the radar, that's what gets measured. But what's perhaps not measured, and it's a question I'm still asking, is there is a ocean of suffering that men are experiencing that we can't even talk about.
Yeah. Like, how much of this is a generational cycle? Like if a father was violent to a mother, if a father was violent to the child, to the little boy, to the little girl, are we more likely to see this behavior repeat itself? Is there a cycle to be broken there?
I would say yes. It's a qualified yes, in that I do know that women who grow up in homes where violence is witnessed are more likely to find themselves in a relationship that is violent. Yeah. So you asked me a quantitative question, and I don't have exact numbers, but I'd say broadly yes, because we're animals. Monkey see, monkey do. Mm-hmm. And if we're not modelled what to do, well, we're kind of trial and error. We're working it out on the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, with the work I do, I've been exposed to men who have come from backgrounds where they have been abused themselves. You can see there is there's something in there's an armor like over them, but you can see that deep down there's this still a deeply hurt child boy in there. Like what is it? Where's the for these men? Like what is the process for these men who might have closed down internally? I mean, you mentioned earlier, like just the lack of like emotional control, emotional intelligence. Like from your perspective, or maybe from your clinical perspective, you know, or even from a process, what do you feel like men, like is there a process of like exploration that men should be going through, like all men should be going through a specific process?
I've heard people far more qualified than me talk about this, and I'm going to give them a shout out. Anna Rubinstein at the Rites of Passage Institute, I know, is passionate about men going through some kind of ritual. Mm-hmm. I know in the Jewish community you have bar mitzvah, and the transition from boyhood to manhood seems to be one that has been blurred out in modern secular society. And it's a question I have, which is perhaps part of this is we need to reinstate these rituals somehow, with or without a religious framing. But fundamentally, is not the shift to manhood one where boys learn to cultivate discipline, take responsibility, develop compassion for self and other? This is how they become useful to society and of service. And I think that when we look at disengagement in school, tertiary education, and the workforce at large, and then the threat of AI and the threat of automation, we are cooking with some very, very pretty problematic ingredients. So the answer is we have to find some way to shepherd men through this functionally, especially when they don't have community.
I mean, I don't believe that the military is like a perfect solution, to this by any stretch of the imagination. But there is a process to go through. There's an initiation process. There's a coming together. There is an exploration. There is challenge to overcome, and the self-worth. Once you overcome that, there is a bonding. There is a connectedness. There's also a shitload of trauma going off fighting wars, but maybe if you take that element out, you know, I am part of the jiu-jitsu community, and I was chatting to some of my mentors, some of my role models that I still look up to, like in the club, and my coaches, and we were just chatting about like jiu-jitsu as a sport. Like it is a hard, challenging thing. It breaks people down. Like it really, for the people who can stay in the sport, there is a level of resilience and adaptation there. And when I look around the room, I'm impressed by a lot of the males and females that I see. Because just turning up to that sport and staying in that sport, you know, if you go through that process to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu, you have gone through trials and tribulations, and you have gone to some, like, you've exposed where your heart is, I think. And I think that for me is almost what martial arts was supposed to be. It was actually connection to the spirit. And I think in modern day, this idea of like spirit, you know, I remember doing a podcast like years ago with Gary at Summer. It was one of the first podcasts we ever do, and it was like, why does this phrase like spirituality like make me cringe? I was like, ugh, you know, like spirituality. But now the more I kind of feel into it, and like when I meet some of these men and they're kind of like so closed, like the heart is so closed, it's like, actually you need to go back to, you need to like reconnect to this like innate spirit. You need, you know, a phrase I often use is strong spine, soft heart. And, you know, finding that middle way, finding that balance between the two. We're not asking for, you know, we don't want to see, in my opinion, you're seeing these young boys come through universities at the moment, and they're kind of like hunched over, and the hood's up, and they're hiding behind a laptop, and they're not communicating. It's so insular. But then they get on the keyboards, and then the badasses once they're on the keyboards, they're telling everyone, and I don't know. It's it's this multi-generational thing. You've almost got the boys coming through who are struggling to connect, which is one concern of mine, which will potentially get increased exponentially as we move into towards AGI. But then you've also got men who I'm seeing in this vision crisis, often might have become fathers in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And from my personal experience of becoming a father, there's this cracking open of the heart. But I think what I'm seeing in that kind of midlife, men in the mid 30s to 40s, looking to evolve, but not necessarily knowing or having the skills to evolve. What am I evolving into? That was actually probably one of the reasons I created Soma in the first place. I personally didn't have the skills. I didn't really have, the places to look. So it's I'm going to try and build this thing. I'm going to build this place where you can gain these skills. And so, I see it with clients all the time. I could see the heart in there, but it's so closed off.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
When you look at these boys and you think, what's their relationship with their body? What you're describing sounds like disembodiment to me, and I imagine they're also mainlining porn and a bit of Andrew Tate and, gaming, and they're kind of living through the screen. What, if I put you in charge of solving it, what would you say? Or do? Or...
Well, we're talking about are we talking about younger men or older men now? I feel I think men need to be connected to their bodies. I would say so. From a physicality perspective, give jiu-jitsu. There is nothing as primal as wrestling with another human being. Testosterone increases in a positive in a positive way, I believe. And I'd love to get your perspective on testosterone and depression in men. There seems to be kind of correlated there. But I think they need to be connected to the bodies. I think a man that is embodied in strength, feels strong, feels like they can be a protector. Insecurities come. I can speak from my own personal experience. When I was growing up, I was stick thin. I had so many insecurities about how skinny I was. When I got to 18, I started lifting weights. Pour on alcohol on top of that, I would go and then fight the world. Literally based upon that insecurity. And so it's, I think, first dealing with that level of insecurity as men go through. I think alcohol is a problem. When I looked at the statistics, it's hard to decouple alcohol and drugs and violence. It's not the whole story, but I would say from the stuff that I was looking at, 50-60%, there's alcohol involved. When you pour alcohol into things, again, problem.
I would say it depends how much, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to say something controversial because I have been tuning in to Scott Galloway, and he says this generation, so let's talk about the young ones, 16 to 24. They're drinking a lot less than we did, and they're not going out, they're not doing crazy things. There was an article, I think, in the AFR the other week. They're not going out and doing tequila shots at clubs or pubs. They're out at Yochi and then in home by 9:30 for some Fitspo walk in the morning. So it seems like there's a real mosaic of what's going on, but are they in their bodies? kind of, but in a kind of neurotic, controlled way, and maybe not in a, I'm going to go out there and take risks. Because one stat that you brought to my attention was around the number of men that have never asked a girl out. Like, that was shocking to me.
Yeah.
So it's like...
Yeah, it's something like, I think it's like 50-60% of males in the US by the time they're 21 had never approached a girl or potential partner.
In person.
In person.
Yeah.
In person. And so I'm going back to my kind of like teens here, my 20s. For me, what I was feeling at that age is just this like sexual drive. Like sexual drive. Like it was just this like all of my like personality. So it was kind of like driven up to like connect to girls.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I would show off in class, I was showing off to impress girls.
Yeah.
When I was drinking, I was actually drinking to get the confidence to connect to girls.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing. So my concern is, and I think it was portrayed incredibly well in the TV show Adolescence. If you have this sexual drive, and boys will have it, girls and boys will have it, and it has nowhere to go, and you are not connected to your body, you don't have the communication skills, you don't have the confidence, and you are online and you're looking at all this like highly like, you know, close to like violent sex on YouPorn, and that's where you're getting this frame of reference. Like, what behaviors are you expecting to see? Like the girl that is sat across the room, I could imagine, who is not only not giving you attention because you do not know how to connect to them, is also humiliating you. Yeah, and you feel and there's the humiliation. And so I think that would breed real bad behaviors.
Well, we know this to be the case.
Yeah.
You know, many would say men's greatest fear is being humiliated. And the conditions that seem to have been created by a lot of people in my world, like the tech world, are the ones you describe, where we have large swathes of young men that are basically involuntary celibates or incels. You just need to go Google that, put it on Reddit to find out this alarming trend of men who, through lack of opportunity, mentoring, cultural cues, zeitgeist, are not taking the risks, the necessary risks, to explore themselves and women in a functional way. And I'm not saying that we want young boys to get hammered and like do bad things, and that's any better than going online and spending 2 years in a Reddit wormhole and then doing bad things. I think that the missing piece in all of this is healthy intimacy, you know, appropriate risk taking.
Yeah.
I don't think we want young people not to take risk.
You know, the work I do today,
Yeah.
like if I got to first principles around it, generally it is about giving people the confidence and the courage to open the heart. And I think at its core, every human wants to be loved, wants to feel love. And, you know, when we're babies, I mean, you stayed at mine last night, you seen the kids, you seen little Tokyo, like just a little ball of love, right?
Yeah.
You know, the heart is open.
Yeah.
The heart is open. And then what happens in this world for the heart to close, and then to get to a point where, you know, it could explode into violence, into someone that they're supposed to be the protector of. You know, I think, you know, you asked me like, what are some of the values? I think men should have pride in being like a protector. Like growing up, like violence towards women for me is cowardice. Like it is, you know, it's even like beating up a man smaller than you or something like violence like that. It's like, for me, it's cowardice, but that's how it plays out.
I'm going to ask a challenging question, which is, what about women's emotional violence towards men? I'm not taking away that men need to do the work. Like, just let's get that straight. But when you look at, say, the incomplete nourishment that a young man gets, because again, when I track back what has happened to boys and men, I've had the great privilege of speaking to, say, child psychiatrists, and why are these men not forming healthy intimacy? And one of the things that's come up is, these early boundary violations. Some astonishing level of young boys are under 12s. And again, please forgive me, listeners, if this is not quite the right statistic, but it's something like 1 in 6 boys is sexually assaulted before the age of 12. And this is a well-suppressed phenomenon. And I think most men might have had some kind of experience like this early. Then we move up to the next bracket, and a question I've had is, what is the impact of, say, growing up in an environment where they didn't have access to the approval and the consistent love of a healthy older male, doesn't have to be their biological dad, but who could give them that sense of worthiness. And we know that there's a huge number of boys that are experiencing the unmitigated sort of inappropriate demands of their mothers. Emotional incest is not something that anyone wants to talk about because, in many ways, mothers are beyond reproach.
Can you define what emotional incest is?
Well, it's when a mother inappropriately places the emotional labour that might typically be picked up by husband, so the husband or partner might be absent, never exist, inconsistent. She places those unmet needs consciously or subconsciously onto her sons or son. And so that boy has no equipment to deal with that, and it creates a whole bunch of wounding and, some would say, rage against the feminine, which can resurface later because they can't exact it against their own mother because the mother is there to kind of provide, and, they can't attack the hand that feeds them effectively. So they're very much trapped. So where does that go?
Is it kind of like the Oedipus complex?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. So the mother focuses all this attention, all this love because she's not connected to the father in some sort of way, or the masculine in some sort of way. So it all gets aimed at the kid.
Yep.
It overwhelms the child.
Yeah, it's a kind of abuse.
It's a kind of
It's a big word, abuse, but it's a kind of abuse. And when men or boys or adolescents grow up in this environment where their mothers basically treated them like a surrogate spouse, they do not form healthy tools or skills about intimate relating. And you see it everywhere. Well, I see it everywhere.
You see, yeah, I mean...
not everyone can see it.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that, right? I mean, you were in the emergency room. You were seeing the effects of these things playing out, and then...
the market failure.
Yeah, the market failure. And then in business today...
Yeah.
It definitely shapes that view.
But to get back to your point around boys and what we're seeing and how to put this all together, the boy that's like no longer in the world, they're just in this virtual heart shutdown. Do you think that the shutdown is happening younger? Because, the men you've worked with are in their mid-career or advanced career and have had, a lot longer to arrive at that shutdown place. Do you think boys and adolescents are shutting down earlier?
I wouldn't know the exact. I think it's kind of playing out at the moment. You can only. I think my view on this would probably be subjective, based upon what I'm seeing. But there's definitely a trend, I think, going through the universities, through kind of like not everyone is in university, but that in schools there is this more insular behaviour. I remember going past a bus stop, like, and in a bus stop now, like everyone's on the phones.
Yeah.
You're seeing that everyone's kind of on the phones, like connecting. And so, yeah, I worry that there are more and more ways to escape connection. Whether it be on-demand TV, Netflix, whether it be on-demand sex, YouPorn, just this kind of instant gratification that does not have to be worked for. And like approaching someone or even like connecting, there's a chance of failure there.
Yeah.
And so I think not having that resilience, I think like one of the things that I've been noticing like at a younger age, which I think is a potential problem, is this kind of concept of almost overcoaching. So, I've been involved with the football setup. I've coached Nancy's football team since she was like under sixes. They were like under 14s now. And you see the setup, and I'm like, wow, the standard of coaching today, like the money that goes into even soccer today and the coaching is like incredible. And you look at like at the higher levels, like as kids get into like academies and stuff like that, it's just incredible. Like there's just this apparatus like around it. And I think if that is a microcosm of some of the wider play at society, then these kids are almost like overcoached. It's almost like, I'm sure private schools are very good, but I can imagine as you go deeper and deeper into a private school, spend more and more money, better and better teachers like over you, like this is how you learn. Like, where is the failure? Like, where is the kind of like self-drive? Where is the efficacy? Where is the agency to go and like make mistakes and figure stuff out yourself? I live in a very different place, Byron Bay, than where I grew up in like Widnes, Liverpool. It's a very different like environment. Like I grew up in a working class environment. The kids were out on the streets playing. Like there was the boys that I played with. There was a ball, there was a rugby ball, it was just like everyone was playing, everyone was out. This idea of I don't see that. Like maybe this is around here. Maybe it's like, kids when they play football, they rock up to an organized thing, an organized futsal competition, or an organized, summer sixes. There's a coach stood on, even for like, the smaller sided like games. There's a coach on the sideline telling them how to play like 5, 6, like, let them play. Let them go and like figure it out. Like, where is God, I feel like an old person here, but like we literally had like jumpers for goalposts. And even now in like soccer training, it was like, there's so much training, like coaching into the coaches to like set everything out like perfectly. I'm like, put a couple of jumpers down on both sides. Here's a ball, like play, girls. Go and figure it out. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not used to this middle class thing. Maybe this is just like this is what happens in middle class. Like somebody tell me I'm wrong here, but there just seems to be like a lot more. I'm going to drive you to this place. I'll pick you up from this place. I'll train you how to do this thing. Like, figure some shit out by yourself. Like when does that happen?
I feel like what you're asking is how do we create resilient people? How do we galvanize strength? And yeah, I think there's this tension between, absolute neglect, I don't care where Timmy is, and, indulgence, which is I'm going to drive you to sport practice when you could ride your bike. Like it's crazy at both ends.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm wondering whether we're focusing on the wrong things, in that maybe the strength is created by presence and being connected, and then also allowing that person to struggle. Something a late mentor said to me, and she had a lot of young people come through her restaurants, was I would never rescue them. You know, some of the people that came into her venues and worked in these places, they had tough backgrounds, and they're working in very elite dining environments. And she said, I would make them work even harder because the crisp white shirt, the rules, the grooming, it was a way to build self-esteem, and that was the greatest gift I could give them. And if I bailed them out for whatever calamity happened, whether it's giving them $1,000 or, you know, $5,000 bailout for whatever situation, I could do it. But she goes, it was the biggest insult I could pay because it was me saying, I don't believe you can get there yourself. And maybe that's what this phenomenon you're talking about, and I'm sure there's multiple things that feed into it, like feeling you have to do that for your kid, peer pressure, is creating the opposite outcome of what parents actually really want, which is strong, resilient, independent children.
Adaptive. Yeah.
Adaptive kids.
And I think this is why I'm doing this podcast. Like
Okay.
when I think about it, it's like I want the parents to evolve, not be static, knowing that there is, you know, whatever your age is, like this, you are not the finished article now. There is opportunities to evolve. There are opportunities to learn, develop. Like you are not the finished article.
Yeah.
Like parents, you can evolve. These kids will force you to evolve. You should evolve.
Yeah.
And then from the child perspective, it's like, okay, well, what are the tools and skill sets that we want to be providing for these kids to flourish in a world of AGI? We need them to be adaptive. We need them to be resilient. We need them to be play. We want them connected with their heart. We want them strong spines, soft heart. And so I think the two things need to happen together. We need to think about, okay, how are we connecting to the kids? How are we giving them good role models, giving them these good skill sets and ethics and values to live by, but also saying to the parents, like, do you know what? I was no angel, like, in my 20s. And I've said this before, like, I did shit that I had shame for in my 30s.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of my 30s, trying to apologize or trying to find forgiveness for myself, for my behaviors in my 20s. But in my 40s now, I feel like I have made peace with that because I've continued to do the work, you know, and it is continually challenging. And, you know, the first child for me, like, broke me open, literally. You know, the second child, again, shook my whole world. Like, the third child did it again. I was like, well, I've done so much work. And then the third one came out, and I was like, wow, there's still so much more to do. And yeah, I spend so much of my life thinking about this, like, with so much, it was my job. It was my day job to, like, help people evolve and help people to transition. So I just think you have to be, like, there needs to be, like linking this back to the start, like, I read your article and was overwhelmed. I was automatically defensive. I would say this in some of our conversations, like, already, I could feel my defense mechanism, my male defense mechanism, like, picking up. It's like, and then, okay, breathe, sit with it. Like, where is that coming from? Like, where is that coming from for me? What, like, is there still something in me where I am not enough, where I feel not enough, that I feel like I am reacting in this way? And that is like 20 years of work for me to be able to do that. But because I feel like not perfect, but growing awareness. And so maybe that's a start.
Well, on the flip side, for what it's worth, I was filled with fear trying to write this article because I'm, you know, come from the other side of this equation. And, you know, some say there are 7 generations of trauma that gets bagged up and passed down genetically. Epigenetics would suggest that that could be a thing. And so, you know, I feel like I'm from a line of women who perhaps haven't had the chance to even be in their power. And that's the other side of the coin, which is neither of us have come from lineages where men and women have been able to, I guess, strong spine, open heart, because maybe the conditions have never existed before now. Maybe we lacked the material abundance. Maybe, the families we're from lack the skills or the culture to make this possible. But I think that everyone's affected by this in different ways. But the only way out of it, and the reason I kind of, say the things that make me nervous about mothers or violence experienced by men, is not because I want to put myself at odds with women and their lived experience. It's I have this sense that we're not seeing the whole picture, and particularly as as we talk about parenting boys, because they clearly need something different because it's not working. Yeah.
I mean, I think the challenge is, I think, like the founder mindset for me, like if we put that cap on for just a moment, you have to be irrationally optimistic about what can be and the future that can be.
True.
And you have to be irrationally pessimistic about the brutal facts of things as well.
Paranoid.
You need to be paranoid. You need to wear those two things like diametrically. And that is, that's ironically probably one of the reasons I've had to lean so much into the tools, into the meditation, and into the breath, into all these mental models for thinking, because I keep putting myself out there and doing scary things that scare the shit out of me. So I need the tools to be able to do that. But I'm also an optimist. Like deep down in my heart, I hope that this technological epoch that we're going through could be this huge liberation for mankind. And I think it could be. There's a percentage chance that this plays out this way, but there's also a percentage chance, and I'm from the northwest of England, that this technological change is so disrupted for a period of time where it places huge swathes of the population in a turmoil. Like I grew up in the northwest of England, like Liverpool, like Manchester, like literally the heart of the Industrial Revolution. Like the Manchester was like the shop of the world. Like Liverpool was this like thriving kind of like marine port. Like some of like Lancashire, the cotton mills, and like all of this. And so I grew up like learning about like this industry, this industrial revolution that went by in the past. But I also grew up in the 80s in northwest England, and I seen take Liverpool for example, with the mechanization and containerization of the ports. Huge swathes of the jobs that used to exist in Liverpool did not exist. Look at Lancashire, like where near I'm from, all the mining, like North Wales, all the mining, all those huge industries like taken out. And so you just had these very prideful men and women where their dignity was taken away from them. And when you look at the generation after that came through, there was the abuse of the welfare state because of that. Yeah. It was the gamification of the welfare state because of that. There was, through the northwest of England, like Liverpool, for example, was the gateway of drugs from Europe because of its port background. So I feel like I've seen like firsthand like the glorification of like what like an epoch change can do. But I've also seen like the devastation of it. And I think it took Manchester and like Liverpool probably another, like, I feel like it's just getting on, they're both just getting on the feet today. Like 60, 70 years after the Second World War. And, but yeah, I've seen like firsthand what almost like a lost generation look like that do not feel like they have prospects, do not feel like they have jobs to go to. And when I think about this change that we could go through with artificial intelligence, you know, you take transportation, for example, generally around like 2% of jobs, I think in Australia and the US and the UK are driving jobs. If you take out that, just that industry is going to get fundamentally disrupted
Yeah.
in the next, 5 or 6 years. Like, where do those people go? What does meaning look like for those people? What does purpose look like? And so if we're not, like, we already have a problem. What you've described to me earlier today was already a problem
Yeah, before all this.
And so, like, this could be the tinderbox that potentially lights it up. The idea that technology net will create more jobs. My concern in the short term, if there aren't some sort of mechanisms or structures for people who are potentially displaced, like potentially programs to go through, like how do we help these people who will lack this meaning and this purpose, and how do we support these people? Like, what is your take on this? That's quite a bit in that.
It's a big one.
It's a big one.
So you started off talking about founders, and I guess founders are a class of people who get to build the future, and there's a huge amount of privilege and responsibility that comes with that. And I would say, from where I stand, my view is that people that have the opportunity to frame the future, whether you're allocators of capital, founders who create the algorithms which attract the capital, governments who create the rules, or people with enormous cultural influence, everyone has a responsibility to think about the downstream impact of what they're putting out there. So the phenomenon you describe, where people are displaced and then left to deal with their uncomfortable emotions by effectively addiction, I'm going to get mixed up in drugs, alcohol.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Rust Belt in the US. It's probably like the classic one everyone knows now, and then the opioid crisis that comes off the back of that follows that up like 10 years later. Yeah.
This is just a symptom of an individual and collective emotional condition. And whether you're addicted to alcohol, exercise, binging, purging, or work, the through line is the same. The essence of addiction is an unwillingness to feel. So the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. And I think this is a imperative that the privileged creators of the world, the people that create the frame, must lean into, because the people that create the incentives are the ones that have an outsized amount of power to generate positive impact in society. And so I think that is a really important conversation. I think it's really important for every consumer to think hard about where you vote, because apps that suck up I think teenage girls spent 5.6 hours a day, certainly until the social media ban is rolled through, on their phones. This is a huge amount of life force that they're pouring into their phones that's not going to generate any meaningful connection back, one might say. And boys, I think, are on par with that. So I guess there is a huge opportunity for us to maybe turn this ship around. But like you, I harbour a real concern that, are we past the point of return? Can we really do this, and what's it going to take? Because it's all about all of us going, well, I'm not going to just optimise for profit and leave the unquantifiable moral consequence to someone else. I'm going to recenter, my heart, which is, I think, where our morality lives, which is, the conscience piece. It's like, who am I when no one is looking? I think that's a really awkward conversation.
Yeah. And I think this is really like sums up the context of this conversation.
Yeah.
It feels so big.
Yeah.
And as an individual in it, it's like, okay, well, what agency do I actually have in this huge thing? But I will take responsibility for me. I will take responsibility. If I do the work, then I can show up as a better husband for my wife, as a better father to my children. That for me is a good enough start. Do you know what I mean? If I can start there, if I can create a little bit more emotional intelligence, a little bit more space that I don't react to something based upon training. I train myself every day. I sit to meditate. I train myself to create more space. Every time I go to jiu-jitsu and I'm humbled, like I'm training myself to do something. And so for me, just starting with my family is that's enough for me. Like, I think given the place that I've been given and the platform that I've been given and the connections that I've been given, the people that I'm connected to can actually have an outsized impact on society.
Yeah.
So I think anyone listening to this is like, do the work. Like, it's that idea of butter cheetah, right? It's like, like I evolve for the benefit of myself, but then of the benefit of others, right? And so start with yourself, because you will feel better. Selfishly, having more control, more of an open heart, you will feel better in yourself. Okay, let's start from the selfish imperative moment. By having these tools, am I going to be able to turn up and be better around my kids and my wife and my partner because of that? Yes. And then for me, the second part of it is like, I do think, given the mediums that we have, given the connections that we have, there are people in our network that we know that have an outsized impact on society, can have an outsized impact on society. And so I think they need the tools, they need to do the work, because they can scale. So I think it's, for me, it's the two-pronged, it's both. Yeah.
It's the middle ground, because I think that we can't have people that are just performing it unless they have walked through the desert themselves and been humbled, whether it's by the jiu-jitsu or some other massive personal challenge. I don't know that they can hold that tension between striving and vulnerability, which is actually, at its essence, that's living. It's, I'm going to keep trying, even though I don't know if I'm going to get a result.
What's the empathy in that? And you tell me, doctor.
Oh, gosh, please.
You know, like I talk, this idea of like heart open, or like, even practicing the ability to sit in other person's shoes. I actually think, being a middle child and like looking up and like looking down, I was like very aware. And so maybe that's like a skill that I developed because I was conscious of what other people were thinking. So maybe that's what, I don't know. But I feel in my heart, I have like love in my heart. I feel empathy when I hear a story where I feel like it's an injustice, or I see, a young person with not the opportunities. Like I feel like the pain for that. If I see like an animal someone's been cruel to, like I feel empathy for that. When you tell me the stories of violence against women, and I sit and I think in how scary and traumatizing that must be. Like my heart feels sad,
But also imagine the internal conditions of the men that are doing this.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's something that is very uncomfortable for people to sit with, because the world we've created rewards outrage. So it rewards the people, the influencers that, the politicians that want to go out and make another $100 million contribution to a women's shelter. But would they be able to drop down and go, I'm not really sure if this is going to work, or how do we actually co-create healthy intimacy? Because that is the thing that lies upstream to all of this, and that is the thing that requires both parties to kind of come together. And that is the thing that I sometimes wonder if parents are willing to be vulnerable as parents, which is, I'm going to let my kid fail. I'm going to actually not rescue them financially or hothouse them or let them struggle. And that's ironically the same thing. It's all the same thing, which is perhaps, how do we run counter to AI, which is trying to almost grind the uncertainty out of every situation? We're going to automate everything.
Yeah.
We're trying to beat vulnerability to the punch, but vulnerability is the way.
And in that vulnerability as well, there's the letting go of the perfectionism. There's letting go of the judgment. So in conversations that I have with people, there's a reacting because of the insecurity, but there's this judgment that I am not enough. And so when my partner tells me I suck because I haven't put the dishes away for the 10th time, like my reaction to that is I'm hearing you suck, you're not enough, you're not loved. Like, what is my reaction to that? And I'm just saying that on like a little microcosm, like the awareness of that. Like, I can see that. I can see that playing out. I can sit in meditation, come out of the room, and for some reason, like a confrontation is like, why have you done this?
Yeah.
And I'm sat in my meditation, and it's still like there's still. So what I'm trying to say in this is that there is no perfection. Like, we're not sat in here saying, okay, like look at perfection. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, if you're feeling that, imagine what like everyday bloke or woman's feeling. We're like battling out here, Pete.
Yeah. So I'm saying, ease the judgment, drop the judgment, because I think that is part of, if you look at some of the spiritual texts, like it is compassion externally, but it's compassion internally. Like, for you to feel compassion, you need to start with compassion for yourself. So I think that's like at the root of a starting place. Can I start the day like with gratitude, with compassion? How does that flow on then and replicate in the rest of the day?
Well, maybe what you're suggesting, this is what I'm hearing, what I'm choosing to hear,
Yeah.
is there is this very special balance between, some might say, the feminine polarity, like the compassion, the empathy, the connection, but also the more masculine hierarchical thinking, I'm stepping up, I'm taking action, I'm taking responsibility, because I don't think we can grow without both. I think if you have a person and you're like, oh, well, do I keep this person in my life or not? A litmus test is, do they have empathy, but also do they take responsibility? Because if you don't have both, I'm not sure that person or that connection can grow. And these are the things I think we all should be optimizing for, whether it's the dynamic with a child or a partner or, society at large. Because it's not generative if it's not those two things. It's parasitic on some level.
Yeah. So taking over responsibility, when you said responsibility, for some reason, the thing that popped in my mind was the statistic around females getting less than 1% of investment.
Oh, yeah.
That was, for some reason, that is what came, like, I was like,
whoa.
Who is taking responsibility like on that? Like, what is happening there? There's 20, 25, 30% female founders, less than 1% capital. Can you fact check me on that?
Yeah, you really want me to say what I think?
Tell me what you think.
Barbara Ann Bernard, you can Google her. She is a way more experienced financier than I will ever, get to be. Not that I'm a financier, but I've worked in this world. She, for I think over a decade, mentored women allocators of capital, I think hedge fund managers, did all the things, got them on the cover of Forbes, on good boards. And I remember in this one conversation, I said to her, so what have you learnt from your career in this space and the allocation of capital? And she's like, it's not complicated. It's just misogyny. They don't want to give women the money. And unfortunately, when I dig deeper, I don't find any counterfactual to that. I think that men do today have control of most of the capital. Some of that will change through inheritance. And I think, shout out to my friend Beck Huang in Silicon Valley, who has create an entire course at Thunderbird School of Management to help women heiresses allocate well. But I think men at some subconscious level will allocate perversely against investor returns to the familiar. And they would rather cop a suboptimal return than risk whatever comes with allocating to the same extent to women. That's what I've got for today. I reserve the right to new information, but I think it's just misogyny.
So the misogyny, so I'm breaking down that men would rather lose face in losing money on a male founder than backing a female founder. And
I'm not sure if it's exactly like that,
Yeah.
but it's like it makes no rational sense for the gender that quite often prides itself in being rational. This is irrational because when you look at how women use money at every scale, from the Greenwich Mean Bank, small micro loans, they uniformly pay it back, right up to the super risky end of VC and funds managed in between. Women are better risk managers empirically. They do more with the money you give them. So you tell me, what can we do with that? Because if a woman dares speak up, and I'm sure this is not going to make me popular saying this, but I think it's important, they will tend to experience, like, men will turn away or pull away. They won't generally go, hey, that's shocking. I want more returns for my investors. Because I've often thought, how do we overcome this? Should we do a class action against Australian Super or all the industry super funds for not using female allocators of capital because they will get better returns? Like, you are depriving large populations of people from returns, one would say. We're being
I'd love to see a breakdown of the funds in Australia,
Yeah.
the VCs,
So would I.
and see a breakdown by male, female leaders.
I want to know who's owning the upside, because that's the real clanger. Like, you've got a lot of funds, say window dressing with LPs and stuff, but who actually owns the fund? That's the real drop dead, that says where this...
So you think that they're actually calling the shots?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't think it's facts. Like, the people the equity holders, so you might have on the front, you might have like 10 people vetting deals, but who is the beneficiary?
Yeah.
Who controls it?
Who finally signs the deals off?
Well, yeah, or who benefits from the upside? Because that upside then means that person can go on and allocate again. So this is why we have such a massive gap between capital that men control and capital that women control. So I don't know. I don't think we're going to get there by, arguing. I think that the change, like, let's say we do want equality, and I'm not presenting that as a foregone conclusion. The change we want requires men, in a way, to work against self-interest. And I guess I've stopped holding my breath for that to be a condition.
Well, I'd love to start with maybe some of the funds that I know, getting a breakdown and trying to see.
I'm going to follow you with the clipboard.
Yeah.
I'll be there. I'll help. I'll bring the waters.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's my action point. There's a couple of people I'll reach out to, try to get a breakdown of that.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a lot of ground covered there.
Huge.
If you could give one point that people should take away from this and one reason for them to share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, what would they be?
The one take-home point.
If it was 1 point, one action point, one take-home point, one action point, and then one reason for sharing this podcast with someone.
The radical change we want completely relies on single individuals taking one step. So to me, the take-home point is the future is not a foregone conclusion. It actually requires everyone, and contrary to the top-down change that might be brought about by the people that get to create the structure, it's the the needle is going to shift when every single individual, through whatever circle of influence they have, shoots their shot. And I guess the action point is, I would ask you just to sit with your feelings. Like, try and sit. If you have 1 minute, make it 1 minute. If it's 5 minutes in the car, 5 minutes. But sit with it and try and imagine the world you want for yourself, for your kids, for your nieces and nephews, for anyone that comes, and let that guide your day.
Okay. And why should someone share this podcast?
Because you and I will field feedback from anyone and we will respond. This is not some like showbiz thing. We're real people, and that's why you should share it, because we are happy to be held accountable, and we will hear you out if you have something to say to us.
Thank you. May, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for coming. Thank you for challenging me. And I appreciate it. And I know there's bravery and courage in the transparency and honesty, but I believe in confronting the brutal facts. And I think this is how we evolve as a society. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.